BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Saturday. Yes, it is the weekend, but welcome to the AMA. I've been a little bit busier these days, so I've been unable to put out the AMAs, the Ask Me Anything episodes on Wednesdays, so they're coming out on the weekend for the time being. And also, it is the month of October now, and while I will not be doing an episode on October 30th to remember Sherri Jo Bates, who was murdered on that day back in 1966, I wanted to say something in tribute to her, as well as to address some of the questions and comments that you guys had put in. But October 30th this year will be a day of resting in peace, mourning, and remembrance for Sherri Jo Bates. But the motivation for this episode is threefold, if you will. Firstly, I wanted to talk about the case because we are approaching the anniversary, and I've been thinking a lot about the Sherri Jo Bates murder, but also because I had read the books Zodiac Killer Solved by Ray Grant and America's Jack the Ripper by Soren Korsgaard, and in both of those books I said that I thought the best parts were their analyses of the murder of Sherri Jo Bates, and the third one is because I wanted to respond to your questions and comments. You guys have sent in so many excellent things about all kinds of episodes, Zodiac Killer, the unconfirmed crimes, or just anything in the true crime world, anything under the sun and in the darkness. And I would like to remind you guys that you can download this show for free at LaunchPad 1. There's a link to that in the description box. That is the audio version. You can download the show as a pure podcast and take it on the go using LaunchPad 1. And in addition to that, there has been a playlist created which uses some of the older AMAs, the Ask Me Anything episodes where I respond to your questions and comments, and that is in the description box as well. The absolute best way to support the show is just by listening, by using things like LaunchPad 1 for free, but also, if you do want to support Black Box Online Radio, I'm not asking for any money. You can just share that playlist of AMAs to anyone you know who is interested in true crime, covering all types of subjects. And since I put out some of those episodes, I've been contacted by people who have been first-hand connections to numerous cases that they knew the people who were involved in them. There's stuff in there about Daniel Huffman. I was also contacted by people who knew Mark Tellis and Mark Iliff, two family members. Well, one was a family member and one was a friend of Lisa Buchanan. And there are just numerous stories that are all included in those AMAs that are available in that playlist. And if you just share with anyone who's interested in true crime, that is a great way to support Black Box Online Radio. And the final announcement would be that I am now reading the book The Zodiac Killer Cover-Up by Lyndon Lafferty, also known as The Silence Badge. Please look out for an episode on Zodiac Mondays covering that material. And on October 29th this year, that's the Friday before Halloween, there will be a Halloween celebration here on Black Box Online Radio. And if you're listening to this at a different time of the year, feel free to celebrate Halloween absolutely any day in our 365, 366 day calendar. The first thing I would like to do in this episode is to go over to a section in Ray Grant's Zodiac Killer Solved that I didn't talk about when I did the book discussion on his material, and that is about the abduction theory. Back in 2019, I was doing a memorial tribute episode for Sherri Jo Bates. Thank you to everyone who listened to that one, by the way. Lots of good feedback on that one from 2019. But I encountered this video online that was talking all about how Sherri Jo Bates was murdered on October 30th of 1966 at some time in the PM hours outside of the Riverside City College Library. That's where her body was found on Halloween morning at 6:30 in the morning approximately. and she had been stabbed with a knife, her throat had been slashed, and there's a very famous number that gets repeated online. I believe on Tom Voigt's podcast, Murder Basement, he even said that he was told that she was stabbed 42 times. That's the number that gets repeated, 42. But reading the autopsy report, it actually reveals that she was stabbed much fewer than 42 times. However, Ray Grant pointed out in Zodiac Killer Solved that the number 42 is not a genuine error. It is rather referring to any type of scratch or superficial laceration. So there are 42 cuts that she experienced when she was attacked by this person. And her, as I said, her body was found outside of the RCC library. The mainstream narrative is that Sherri Jo Bates left her father a note saying going to the RCC to study. She goes into the library. She's there for about 3 hours. She's walking out. Her car won't start. Her Volkswagen Bug, a lime green colored Volkswagen Bug. Some guy lures her into a dark alley and then attacked her with a knife. Now, this person would go on to write a series of letters, 3 of them saying Bates had to die, there will be more. One of them actually says she had to die, there will be more. And then another one was the Riverside Confession that was typed on a royal typewriter, if I remember correctly. And that's the one that said Miss Bates went to the slaughter like a lamb, and she was stupid. She gave him lots of brush-offs, indicating that he knew who she was. She was specifically targeted. I mean, obviously, the killer had familiarity with her name, or I should say the person who wrote that confession. Because with the murder of Sherri Jo Bates, there's always this possibility that a different person wrote the letters and committed the murders, and a different person was responsible for this part of the crime and that part of the crime, and that there was more than one accomplice, and so on. But first, I would like to go to this section in Zodiac Killer Solved by Ray Grant that says, Sherri Jo Bates never made it to the RCC library that night. There would seem to be no other reasonable conclusion but that no one saw Sherri Jo Bates after 6:15 that night because she never made it to the RCC library. It would simply not have been possible for such an outgoing person, after parking circa 6:20 p.m., to spend 2 hours and 40 minutes inside such a small space without many of the library patrons being aware of her. But maybe Sherri had tunnel vision because of her impending midterm paper assignment. And over the years after looking into this, that's the explanation that I think a lot of people put forward. They just think that Sherri Jo went into the library, she went into the back, maybe a table in the far off corner that no one was really paying attention to. But I do give Ray Grant credit because there are not a lot of witness statements. Well, what happened on the day leading up to Sherri Jo's murder? Also from Zodiac Killer Solved. Additionally, it's clear from the 2 witness accounts from the previous 2 hours and 30 minutes that Sherri Jo Bates had been prominent on people's radar screens that afternoon. Number 1, Stephanie Gutman received a call from Sherri at 3:45 p.m. Number 2, friends passing Sherri's house at 4:30 p.m. noticed her car parked out front. Number 3, Joseph Bates found a note from Sherri at 5:20 p.m. Dad went to RCC library. Number 4, a Mexican-American student saw Sherri writing in her notepad at 5:25 p.m. Number 5, her friend Donna received a call from Sherri at 5:30 p.m. Number 6, a friend of Sherri saw her drive by on Magnolia at 6:10 p.m. Number 7, a March Air Force Base man saw a blonde driving a lime green Volkswagen Beetle up an alley past him at 6:15 p.m. In 2.5 hours, Sherri had no fewer than 7 encounters of one type or another with 7 different people, and all 7 encounters took place when she was technically alone. So how could Sherri have 7 encounters with people in a 2-hour and 30-minute period during which she was either alone at her house or out and about by herself, and then have 0 encounters in a 2-hour and 40-minute period when she was supposedly inside a small city college library facility with 5 dozen people, several of whom were her friends? And it's a brilliant observation. I mean, like, why aren't there witness sightings of people saying, oh, yeah, I saw her in the corner. Yeah, she stayed there for over 2 hours, and people aren't reporting that they noticed her there? Well, I mean, Ray Grant's response is that Sherri never made it into the library, that she was abducted, and in Zodiac Killer Solved, it does provide an explanation about, well, somebody must have taken her library card and checked out books under her name, or some way, somehow, someone put 3 library books on the seat of the Volkswagen Bug, because I'm sure immediately some of you are thinking, well, she had 3 library books on the seat of that car, so, I mean, it's an unsolved case, so I will leave it at that. But because this is an AMA and I want to cover many different subjects, I would like to go to something in Soren Korsgaard's book, America's Jack the Ripper, and it talks about how, in December of 1966, a custodian working at the RCC library found a message that had been written on a desk in storage. And I will just read from Soren Korsgaard's book, America's Jack the Ripper, the definitive account of the Zodiac Killer. During Christmas at Riverside City College, a custodian made a shocking discovery while removing several desks. On one of them, he observed a chilling poem, ostensibly referring to the killing of Sherri Jo Bates. The writer had used a ballpoint pen. The poem read, "Sick of living, unwilling to die, cut clean, if red, clean, blood spurting, dripping, spilling, all over her new dress. Oh well, it was red anyway. Life draining into an uncertain death. She won't die this time. Someone'll find her. Just wait till next time. R.H." Now, Soren is really good with the linguistic analysis. His book is filled with that. But when I read this off in my copy of America's Jack the Ripper, I was just like, oh my gosh, it seems so clear. It was just clear as day. This isn't connected. This is not talking about Sherri Jo Bates. I give credit to the custodian for coming forward and saying that he found this morbid poem. And a lot of people have pointed out that they think the handwriting is very similar to that of the Zodiac Killer, but you have to look at the context here. The poem is not talking about murder. It's talking about self-mutilation. Let's read it again. Sick of living, unwilling to die. Well, I mean, Sherri Jo Bates was murdered. It has nothing to do with unwilling to die. Cut clean, if red, clean, blood spurting, dripping, and spilling, all over her new dress. Oh well, it was red anyway. Life draining into an uncertain death. She won't die this time. And this is not my original observation, this is from Soren Korsgaard in the book. She won't die this time. Well, Sherri Jo Bates was indeed murdered. She did die that time. How would that be a reference to her? Just wait till next time. I mean, you'd have to say something like, oh, well, the poem could have been written earlier. But you really got to look at the full context. And I just had that aha moment about, was this referring to Sherri Jo Bates? Was it written by the Zodiac? It sounds like it's talking about a female who is self-harming, like a female who is doing some self-mutilating injuries, sick of living, unwilling to die. Someone is contemplating either suicide or self-harm, cut clean, if red, clean, blood spurting, dripping, and spilling. That is not about stabbing another person. That, I mean, once it's partnered with the sick of living, unwilling to die, that means that it is about cutting oneself. And then I believe that this narrator is referring to herself in the third person. Anyway, life draining into an uncertain death. She won't die this time. Someone will find her. That also suggests that she is doing this and she's surrounded by people, maybe someone who has a family, or she lives in a family home. So says me anyway. Now, it's possible that it was written by a man, and he's writing about a female character, sure, and I've looked at the handwriting, I'm sure you have too. It seems like that is masculine handwriting. It doesn't look like the handwriting of a woman, but was it the Zodiac Killer? No, it's not even talking about murder. It's talking about contemplating suicide, or more specifically, self-harm. And because this is an AMA and I wanted to respond to your questions and comments, we had a question from Hamid about the Sherri Jo Bates case, and it was done on the episode Riverside Connection and False Leads. That was me doing a more or less strong stance on the subject, saying that I did not believe that the Bates murder was connected to the Zodiac Killer, and Hamid's question was, could it be possible that the actual killer was never a suspect in the first place? Absolutely yes, 100% yes, as long as this remains an unsolved case. Absolutely could be somebody who was off of the radar, so says me anyway. The authorities always have more material than they lead on, but I do have to give credit to one of you guys. Now, was it Anna who made this statement that there was an unrelated murder that took place in the Midwest on a college campus, and it was an older mentally ill guy who looked a little bit younger, and he was trying to blend in with the college students. He didn't even go to the college, but he attacked and murdered a woman, and he was doing it as an opportunistic, predatory decision. Like he's a predator on campus trying to blend in with the college students so that he can attack a woman. Absolutely, there are people who are going to do things like that. And for a long time, the authorities were looking at a guy that we call Bob Burnett. That's not his real name. But some people say that he was exonerated because of DNA. Other people say that there were multiple attackers. And if you read the book Zodiac Killer Solved by Ray Grant, it talks about a theory involving multiple attackers. One is holding Sherri Jo Bates down, and another person is inflicting these stab wounds. Now, I forget where I read this one, but the problem that somebody raised with saying that it's going to be some guy like Bob Barnett and he brought a friend. Who brings a friend to murder? Like someone is going to get into a confrontation with Sherri Jo Bates? Sure. And they're going to bring a friend to talk to her? Sure. But to just hold somebody down for the friend, hey, I need you to hold down this girl while I stab her with a knife. I mean, who is really going to go along with that? I mean, it's a little bit far out. Crazier things have happened. I repeat, crazier things have happened, and it's not physically, logically impossible. But I even have my doubts on that someone is just going to be so willingly going along with such an atrocious plan, especially if they're not connected to the scene. But a lot of people do believe that, including the profiler Sharon Hagan, who said that she didn't think that the Bates murder was connected to the Zodiac killer because of the physical connections. It's such a physical crime where the person is getting into this altercation, confronting Sherri Jo Bates face to face, and then fighting with her. She's pulling out clumps of his hair. She rips off his Timex wristwatch. It's so physical. And the Zodiac killer didn't do that. Not at Lake Hermit Road, Blue Rock Springs. At Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac got physical with the victims, like actually touching them once they were already tied up. And the Zodiac moved Paul Stein's body after Paul Stein was already dead, so you can see that the Zodiac isn't fighting people when they have the ability to fight back, or the Zodiac isn't touching people when they have the ability to fight back. And for this reason, I do agree with Michael Morford when he said the Zodiac was a coward. I mean, I asked him that during the Zodiac Killer interviews with the expert series, which is available on the Zodiac Killer channel. Always inviting you guys to like and subscribe. Now, there was another comment that came in here on that same episode about the Riverside connection, and it was from NPC Porky, who said, the Zodiac never took credit directly for killing Bates. He said, yes, I did. He never said, yes, I did kill Miss Bates in Riverside, as the newspapers say. He just said in 1971, I do have to give them credit for stumbling across my Riverside activity, but they're only finding the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there. This could be an allusion to the desktop poem or letters. Well, as of now, I don't believe the desktop poem is connected to the Zodiac Killer in any way. If you want to talk about the letters, then, I mean, maybe NPC Porky made a brilliant observation that it doesn't say crime, or it doesn't say murder. I mean, it doesn't say I murdered anyone. It says my Riverside activity. Does that mean writing a letter taking credit for murder that he didn't commit? Does that mean anything about some type of deviant behavior that is not murder? Or just to say NPC Porky's observation in a more articulate way, because it deserves a response like that, the person is not directly saying that the activity is murder. I mean, it could be referring to a wide range of behaviors, including writing letters. Now, I will address something that I'm sure you guys are very much well aware of now, and I've talked about a lot on the channel, and that is in 2016, somebody took credit for writing the letters saying that Bates had to die, there will be more, she had to die, there will be more, and they're signed with the Z that has the little squiggle on it. When I was interviewing Michael Cole for the interview with the expert series, he said very clearly that he disputed the findings of that press release. That, I mean, he was unconvinced that this person who claimed that he wrote the letters in 2016 as a prank or a hoax was telling the truth. He didn't believe it. Now, other people have also said the same thing. They are unconvinced that his confession was authentic. And to clarify, I believe that some guy in 2016, 50 years after the murder of Sherri Jo, confessed to writing the letters Bates had to die, there will be more. Not the typed confession, but just the letters that are written on lined binder paper. And the authorities looked into him, and they have cleared him. They agree that he wrote the letters, but they do not believe that he murdered Sherri Jo Bates, and they also do not believe that he was the Zodiac killer. For me personally, and this might piss some people off, but I put a lot more weight on what law enforcement says. I give them a lot more credit than other people do, and I believe them when they share things. So I believe that those letters are a prank or a hoax until they say otherwise, or until it is proven otherwise, that there's some type of DNA breakthrough, fingerprint breakthrough, or some type of forensic anything that would reveal something to the contrary. Because I don't think that they are going to lie about those things, or they're going to mislead us, or they have reasons why they think that these things are authentic or not authentic, and we don't always get to know them. But as of now, I accept that the Bates Had to Die letters were a prank, they were a hoax, they were not written by the real killer. And, I mean, you can respond to that in the comment section if you want, but a prime example of this is David Oranchak's solution to the 340 cipher. Many people have claimed that they have solved the 340 cipher before. Even I did. I did an episode on this channel, which I invite you to listen to, where I talk about my attempt to solve the 340 cipher, and it's really David, Carl Van Eyck, and Sam Blake. But when they solved it, we knew that that was the answer. I mean, it had the esoteric Zodiac language, it had the misspellings in place, it spelled paradise, Paradice, everything matched up. We knew that that was the answer, and the FBI signed off on that. And them signing off on that gives me some understanding that it's coming from a reasonable place. Now, is law enforcement always right? No. Is the FBI always right? Hell no. I mean, look, when they're trying to stop things like terrorists and so on, no, but that's all beside the point. The only thing that I meant to convey in this little rambling section is that I will accept their signing off on something as authentic or inauthentic until I see anything that can prove it to the contrary. Now, speaking of the ciphers, I did an episode last winter talking about Dirt Poor Richard and his alternative solution to the 340 cipher. I got on his YouTube channel because, for an interesting reason actually, I was on Facebook and I saw that Goldcatcher, Blaine, and Dirt Poor Richard actually has solutions to numerous ciphers. Just glancing at his YouTube channel now, he has things for the Z32 as well as the true solution and hidden message of the Z408. He has something about the dripping pen card, and what we'll talk about today, because this is the Sherri Jo Bates AMA, is something that has been found in the Riverside Confession. And one more time, the name of his channel is Dirt Poor Richard. But Blaine was posting about him on Facebook, the informant known as Goldcatcher, who brought Richard Gaikowski forward. And Blaine is somebody who disputes the findings of the 340 cipher that were achieved by David, Jarl, and Sam. I think that their solution is correct, being clear about that. Sometimes people can't always get my meaning. But what Goldcatcher said, what I thought was interesting, was he also disputed Dirt Poor Richard's solution to the 340, and I just thought that he was calling out someone that I didn't expect him to call out. I'm gonna play a video clip. Oh, you'll hear the audio version, that is, from Dirt Poor Richard's YouTube channel. I hope he doesn't mind if I share this. And this is called his Zodiac Killer Riverside Confession Letter, Hidden Message.
Some of the letters. Here's the Riverside Confession Letter. As I've told you before, the message is always based on the spelling mistakes. Here's brownette, minutes, choked, twitched. Should have been brunette, minutes, choked, twitched. take the letter it should have been and put it above the letter it shouldn't have been. In this case, the U goes above the OW. There should have been an E over here, goes above an empty space. Same with the E here, also the T here. This A should not have been here, and so you put an A above it. When I highlight it, you can see the hidden message. You owe me a watch. He borrowed letters from within the words on this one, but this is one of his primitive ones. And the others work approximately the same way, but he uses modified versions of it every time, so it's not identical each time. It makes it a little harder for you to figure each one out. Next, I'll be giving you the hidden message in the Stein letter.
Okay, and that was Dirt Poor Richard that you heard just there. The first point to respond to this is, well, I should say I watched the video a couple times, because at first I thought, oh my goodness, maybe he's really on to something. And secondly, I watched it again, and I don't think that his metric, the way that he is using this to solve the message, is 100% accurate in this, because it might be a very profound idea that the person who is putting all these misspellings into words means that you're supposed to write the correct letter above the misspelling, and then that will reveal a new word. Like, as you said, brownet is spelled B-R-O-W-N-E-T-T, but that's meant to be the word brunette. So you put the U above O and W, and then you add an E above the final T, and it says U-O me, because minutes is misspelled, and then you put the E above the space where it should be, so you owe me a watch. However, when I said his metric isn't completely correct, and Richard did say this in the video, he borrows the M from a correctly spelled place. Minutes begins with an M, and it does in the misspelling too. Twitch also uses the W, C, and H. So the second time I listened to that, I was like, oh wait, this one I'm not convinced on that that's actually the meaning of it, because when I first heard that, I was like, I'm someone who said that I've never thought there's any real reverse side connection in the Sherri Jo Bates case. However, I mean, I kind of just got red for a second. I was like, what? What did he just find? But by Richard's own admission, he's borrowing from the correctly spelled letters, like the letters that are in the correct place, and then he's combining them with the misspellings and then the corrections. He's putting it all together, but only sometimes. And I don't think that that is a genuine solution. Now, on the other hand, I could be completely wrong, and I just never heard anyone make that observation about, if you look at the Zodiac killer's misspellings and you write the correct letters above them, then it can reveal a new word, that meaning that the misspellings are not arbitrary. They actually do have a reason for them. And some people simply think that the misspellings were meant to show things from his personal life, like they aren't significant of any hidden message. But the famous example is, I'm mildly serious as to how much money you have on my head, and Cirrus is spelled C-E-R-O-U-S, which it's meant to be the word curious. I'm mildly curious, but it's spelled Cirrus, C-E-R-O-U-S, and that comes from Cirrus oxalate, which is a chemical, and they think, oh, well, the Zodiac may have been a scientist, a chemist, or something of the sort, someone who had knowledge of chemistry, which many Zodiac killer suspects have. But that stuff I will entertain. Sure, okay, it's an intentional misspelling, but it's not gibberish. It actually reveals something about the author's identity. If Richard's solution did not borrow any of the correct letter placings, and by correct letter placing I mean that if he just had this completely throughout, that all of the misspellings and followed that same rule, you put the correct letter above them, and that reveals a new word, like this thing, you owe me a watch because a watch was left behind, even though it doesn't reveal anything about the person's identity. If that's the solution to finding out what is hidden in the letters, I would have been like, oh my goodness. I would have thought long and hard about everything I've said about Sherri Jo Bates. I had to rethink the case. but it's just not there. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just a polite disagreement. And giving a shout out to longtime BBOR listener Jim Peterson, who has been very passionate in the comment section about how he does not believe that the Zodiac killer had anything to do with Sherri Jo Bates' murder. And he says something on last year's tribute to Sherri Jo Bates called Remembering Sherri Jo Bates, which you can hear on this channel. He said Tom Voigt is and has been force-feeding the Zodiac as Sherri Jo Bates' killer for years. Those confession letters are red herrings pertaining to CUB. Not gonna lie to you, I don't know what CUB is, if anyone can fill that in the comment section. But about Tom Voigt, he said in that, not only in at least one place on ZodiacKiller.com, but something that he shared with me via correspondence is law enforcement in the early 1970s believed that Sherri Jo Bates was murdered by the Zodiac killer, and they were strongly looking into the Riverside connection. It doesn't just come from Robert Graysmith and this Paul Avery story that you might see in the writings and message shared by Robert Graysmith. But law enforcement took this very seriously. They thought there was a genuine connection of the Zodiac killer operating in Southern California. When I was reading Soren Korsgaard's book, America's Jack the Ripper, and I recommend this book to you, all of that stuff was in there. Yes, law enforcement was looking into that. However, in 1974, a press release was issued by Riverside saying that they did not believe that there was a Zodiac killer connection. So in the early 1970s, it appears that that is true. And I was just flipping through the pages of America's Jack the Ripper right now, and sorry I misspoke on, or I misstated a fact rather. That press release that I was just referring to was the RPD press release that was issued on May 20th of 1982, and according to Soren's book here, that it states that the connection between Sherri Jo Bates and the Zodiac killer was based on outdated information, and that they are not believing in a connection between the Zodiac killer. I'll just go ahead and read that little section here that is on page 209. In the following, the controversial letter will be examined in depth to establish if Sherri's killer was indeed the person who authored it, and to find out if that person is the Zodiac. Back in the late 1960s and 70s, key figures in RPD embraced the possibility that the Zodiac had killed Sherri Jo Bates. However, in the early 1980s, they released a statement to the press that emphasized that the alleged connections with the Zodiac were based on outdated information. And once again, the source for that is a press release from 1982. I misspoke, or I misstated it earlier, saying it was from the 1970s. And the reason I wanted to bring that one up was I had, of course, had some familiarity with these claims in the in the early 1970s about how people thought that there was this definitive connection between Sherri Jo and the Zodiac, but it appears that Riverside police, if that press release, once again, is correct, that in the 1980s they began to distance themselves from that particular theory. 1982, not the 1970s. I was wrong with that one. That's why I double-checked, something I need to do a little bit more often. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode here, and if you have any comments about the murder of Sherri Jo Bates and you would like to weigh in the comments section, what do you think of the abduction theory? What do you think of the idea that she was abducted by two people and spent an hour and a half with them somewhere? And it doesn't have to be something like a full-on, like they're holding her down with a knife to her throat in the back of a van kind of abduction. It could just mean that she went with somebody for 90 minutes before entering the library, and that she was let out later on. I mean, what do you think happened to Sherri Jo Bates? What do you think of the abduction theory? What do you think of the Zodiac killer connection? What do you think about any of these things involving the letters? Like, for example, like Dirt Poor Richard's solution that if you correct the misspellings and then blend that in with some of the correct spellings, then it reveals a new message. You owe me a watch. I think I said very clearly my thoughts on that, that it's not using the same rule all the time, or he's only following his rules some of the time. I'm not convinced by that, but what do you think? I mean, like, you can weigh in the comments section below, and I recommend you watch his videos. I recommend you read the book America's Jack the Ripper by Soren Kierkegaard, Zodiac Killer Solved by Ray Grant, the ones that I was referring to. And you can always listen to Tom Voigt's show Murder Basement, as well as reading ZodiacKiller.com. He's a believer in the Zodiac connection. And one person whom I haven't talked about in this episode who is a believer, or I have talked about him only very briefly, his name is Michael Cole. He's the author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy, and I mentioned him when I said he talked about how he did not agree with the press release that was put out saying that the Bates had to die letters were inauthentic. What do you think about all of that? And I do recommend Michael Cole's Zodiac Revisited trilogy very much. I think it's an excellent piece of commentary, especially the parts about fact-based speculation. But please weigh in the comments section down below. As always, you can visit the Teespring page, Amazon.com, look at the book Killer on a White Horse, AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube. Lots of ways to keep in touch and interact and support the show. But most importantly, feel free to just share that playlist with anybody in the description box. I'll see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.